Welcome to Things You Don't Know, the podcast that brings you little-known facts concerning well-known people and events, reveals the impact of little-known people and events, and, hey, always seeks to entertain. So today, we're looking at overcomers, particularly female overcomers. And our next guest is a very exciting woman who has a number of achievements. And we, Sean, Dr. Dineen, and myself are very, very excited and enthused about this. Dr. Dineen, introduce our guest.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Weaver. My friends, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Christine Mccohnell, a professor of disability studies at Ramapo College, retired, an artist, an advocate for inclusion in many areas, and a dear friend of mine.
And let us also mention that, Christine, do you want me to call you Christine?
You can call me whatever you want.
Okay, except for late for dinner, right? Yeah, as you probably can hear, Christine does have a slight speech impediment, so that hasn't stopped her or affected her, accomplishments in any way. But I did want to add that. Anyhow, Sean, go ahead and finish your introduction.
Friends, I've known this woman since we were kindergarten students at the Cerebral Palsy Center in Edison, New Jersey, back in the dark ages of the late 70s. And I've never ceased to be amazed at her drive and passion for life. I'd like to start this, Christine, if I may. You taught for many years at Ramapo, as I briefly said, and it must have been a bit of a challenge to communicate fully with the students. How were you able to work around that difficulty?
Well, each lecture, I do a PowerPoint. Well, I did a PowerPoint to coincide with my lectures. I also use humor to see if the students are able to follow the lecture.
So, two very effective tools, my friends, humor to keep everyone engaged and PowerPoints. Technology has really been a boon to us in that area.
Correct.
Indeed. Sean mentioned a number of accomplishments that you have been able to make over the years. You undoubtedly had to overcome some things. How did you do that? And I'm not just talking about a classroom lecture, but we know that when you have any kind of difference, whether it's because your skin is black or you're Native American or you're female or you're Islamic or you're Jewish or you're Asian, whatever, people tend to kind of discount and minimalize and put you in a box. So how did you deal with that, Christine?
It was very difficult, but my parents always pushed me, and that gave me the drive to be able to push myself to the fullest my capabilities.
That's a very important point. I mean, this has happened to me also. family is loving and supportive and helpful in any way they can, but they didn't treat us any differently. They didn't infantilize us or limit expectations. So you're absolutely right there also that expecting the best we could provide was an important motivational tool and got us to the point where we could do that for ourselves.
So, how did it occur to you to get into teaching?
Well, I was not supposed to be a teacher or academically, but I was asked to teach one semester. And I love teaching, so that one semester lasted 10 years.
Yeah, Christine, of course, Dr. Dineen and myself both had many years in teaching at university level, various places. What was it like the first day of the first class of the first semester when you go into the classroom? What was going through your mind?
Well, my first teaching was a colleague of mine. We co-taught a class. So she led the class, and I would follow her lead. But the first solo class, I was scared that no one would understand me. But however, I was quite surprised how they caught on to my speech impediment.
Yeah, and that's true, but oh my God, that must have just, I mean, to me, I look at that and I say, oh, how much courage did that take?
Absolutely. I mean, I've had a different circumstance, but I can tell you, Dr. Weaver, if I may, there's a certain passion that gets into you. You just fall in love with the subject and interacting with the young people. It's a way of really asserting your best self. When I'm in a classroom, it's almost like I'm in another world.
I agree. When I used to teach, I used to get an extra high.
Oh, that's two of us there. And that high is very strong.
That's three of us, actually. I remember very, very distinctly the first time that I taught a university class. I came in 2 weeks late because the person that had been scheduled to teach it just sort of dropped out. And yeah, so I was already behind. I was like, oh my God, this is going to just be a mess. And so I said, well, I cannot see myself standing up there in front of a class just giving a lecture because I think it's boring as hell, quite frankly. It was an intro to psychology class. It was like, okay. And I just was very direct with everybody and told them that I was a little concerned because we were already 2 weeks behind. So I prepared notes for them for those first 2 weeks and said, we'll talk about it, but you're going to have to do the extra work yourself. And then my predilection for such things is to do very hands-on, not just tell the class, this is what classical conditioning is, and this is what operant conditioning is, and and put half the class to sleep. I would actually do demonstrations. Did you also do that, Christine?
I also did that. One of the group, they always worked in groups.
Uh-huh.
They won't get bored.
So you found that working in groups kept the students on their toes, pun intended.
Right. They cut down their toes, and that allowed me to work on them one-to-one.
Oh, that's great.
Because in the small groups, I would, if you don't, quote unquote, watch them, they would talk about what they did last night, what parties were good. So I had to wheel around the classroom to make sure they were doing their assignment.
Oh, yeah, I've had to do that. I found if you don't, particularly the folks in the back, start playing Candy Crush or emailing or doing anything but what they're supposed to do.
So what was the first class you taught, Christine?
First year seminar.
It was what?
First year seminar.
First year seminar for
College student.
psychology?
It's basically a getting used to college course, sort of a how we do things here.
Oh, okay. I get it.
And then I met my mentor and I taught self-growth, a higher level, 300 level psychology course. And he focused on the spiritual aspect, and I focused on the psychological aspect.
That's amazing.
And then after that, he asked me what would I want to teach, what would be my dream course. And I said disability studies. So I went back to school to be able to teach and be the acting convener of the disability studies minor.
So your focus on disabilities studies, is that where you came into contact with affirmative theory?
I came in contact with it at my graduate level. I attended Seton Hall University studying the psychological impacts that the disabled community was surrounded by, not only individuals with disabilities, but their loved ones, the community as well.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you were looking at how being immersed in that sort of, for lack of a better phrase, identity had an impact.
Yes.
Okay. Can you say a little bit more about the theory?
The theory, well, in the United States, still the three models, the moral model, the medical model, and the minority model. And I felt I didn't fit into any of them. So I had to research outside the United States, and I found a theory called the Affirmation Model, a slang and flex 2000 that combined a minority model and a medical model.
Okay, and just to explain for those of you who don't know, medical model focuses on physical rehabilitation and the idea of a cure. Minority model looks at how intersectionality and how people suffer some of the same identities and limitations that have come on ethnic, gender, racial, religious minorities in the country. So this affirmative model mixes them both in a positive sense to create a self-directed, autonomous way of thinking.
Is that correct, Christine?
That's correct. But also, you have the combination are hard to do because they're so different, but they're so similar. We all know that we can be transparent with identities.
Aha.
So as my CP progressed, I wanted to be as healthy as I could be by diving into the medical model.
So you wanted to maximize your abilities and also to create a sense of pride. That's one of the things I've always admired about you. You pull no punches, you are who you are, and you are kind and welcoming, but you placate nobody.
Correct.
One of the things you mentioned, which I think is so important in my perspective, is this whole identity issue. I think oftentimes people who have a disability identify themselves as the disability, and I think that's a mistake. But it's compounded by others looking at them and identifying them as the disability rather than a person with abilities. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I agree, but you have to remember our role models are disabled. And if they dismiss that disability, example Judy Human, who founded the Individuals with Disability Act in 1973, if she ignored her disability, I don't think the act will pass.
Yes, if I can just reinforce what you're saying here, you were talking about some of the leaders of our community, people like Judy Human, who played an important role in getting the IDEA, the Rehab Act, passed, and that it was vital for her to embrace that as part of her identity. Now, this is not victimhood or looking for pity at all. It's just recognizing a unique set of circumstances that drive us to our maximum achievement. The affirmative model mixes the medical and social model approach, combining maximum health with individual autonomy and self-directed life choices.
I vanity, but want to pursue more by getting help medically. So it's a tricky paradoxical ideology.
Yes, I know what you mean. There's nothing wrong with seeking out or choosing necessary help if one wishes it. The ideology comes with people on the one hand who want cures at all costs and people who almost romanticize their difficulty. As our mutual friend from the center, Dr. Andrew Kramer, used to say, you cure meat, not people. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't use therapies, diets, surgery, whatever you wish to maximize your potential, but we are not going to make our problems go away. So we have to integrate with the larger community while we're preserving the better parts of ourselves.
Yeah, I would imagine the trick is not succumbing to the notion that you are limited. What I mean by that is I would think that many people in your circumstances, Christine, would say that they are limited and cannot give a lecture to a university students. And I think that that's false, as you have very ably demonstrated, by the way. But I think it is a danger that happens also in concert with what you're just saying.
I agree.
Yes, I think both of you make excellent points, that we should not ignore our reality, but we should not consider ourselves limited, because the tendency for that is despondency and frustration and lack of activity. I think the more active we are, not only physically, intellectually, spiritually, and so on, the better for ourselves, those around us, and the larger world.
I agree.
Well, and Christine, I think one of the things that Sean just mentioned is the value to society in general that people from every spectrum make, and the uniqueness of those contributions based on their own experience, their own culture, etc. For example, I think it behooves us to not just allow people to have a voice in a patronizing sort of way, but actually to listen and learn.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I've learned a great deal, if I may say so, from you, Christine, and from you, Dr. Weaver. You both have, in your own nurturing, determined ways, pushed me along and encouraged me to make the best of the talents I've been blessed with.
Well, thank you.
And thank you, Sean. Yeah, I am very impressed with some of the unique contributions that you've made, and I'm sure as Dr. Dineen would agree with me on this, and I'm sure you do too, that teaching is not just for the moment, but it is teaching for today and tomorrow. It is the impact that you can make, and the pleasure of being able to do that is inestimable.
Yes. I miss teaching a lot.
I'm sure you do.
I wanted to ask, Christine, you have a great interest in art. Can you tell us a little bit about what type of art you do?
I do watercolors. I do technique, decoupage. It's placing. It's like a collage.
That sounds beautiful. You have a website for that also, as I understand.
Yes, my website is timelessparadise.com.
Timelessparadise.com. I strongly encourage you to look at it, friends. It's amazing.
So there you can see how I got started. In the future, I'm going to write a blog about the difficulties I had to overcome with doing all my art with one hand.
You and Karen would have a lot to talk about. She's got the better use of one hand. So
in addition to the speech impediment, you have some difficulty with one of your hands?
Yes, I only use one hand. The other hand, it has spasms, and it's hard to control at times.
Sure. Okay. Spasms would be very difficult. What would you consider your greatest contribution that you've made?
I got teaching all the years. I hope I impact some of my students.
yes, that's the greatest impact you give through your teaching.
Unfortunately, we are really running out of time for this. I have enjoyed it. I hope that you have enjoyed it.
And I just want to thank you personally. I mean, we've known each other a long time, but it took a lot of courage to come here today, and I'm deeply grateful.
I'm grateful to be on this podcast as well.
All right. I thank you sincerely and appreciate it. I've enjoyed it. Well, thanks for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this and hope you'll join us for future editions. Have a good day. Bye-bye.